Good morning, stackers. Welcome back to another Money in the Morning from the Basement. I'm Joe Saul-Sehy, Average Joe Money on Twitter. Grab your coffee, pop in the headphones, get your personal finance on, because today I'm here joined in the background by Mom's cat, Cooper. He's hanging out in the usually we kick Cooper out before we start recording OG and Doug and I in the basement. But today you're lucky he's sleeping, so I decided to leave him there. Hey, today we spun the What's Today's Headline wheel, and we've got two great ones. Warren Buffett won a big bet he placed some time ago. We'll talk about that bet and what that means for your money. And we'll also talk about a strange estate planning case. Craig Sager, for those people that are sports fans, may know that Craig Sager was a sideline reporter for a long time, passed away recently, and some issues with his estate. So let's get running on that in a second. But first, the show's brought to you by Stacky Benjamin's courses. Want to learn about money but afraid of those courses by nerds who talk over your head like that dude who repairs your computer? Well, we've got you covered. From saving half your income to building a millionaire mindset to legally cheating on your taxes. We're actually working on that course today. If you purchase that course, you're getting a module. And everybody who's purchased it in the past is getting a module with all of the 2018 tax law changes. Doesn't change the course a lot as we went through it, but we're going to have some extra stuff in there where you can take advantage of the new tax code. Get your learning on learn.stackybenjamins.com. That's learn.stackybenjamins.com. Got a great show today, so let's get it moving. Good morning to everybody watching us live on Facebook. Charlotte, Karen, Jennifer, good to see you all here this morning. I've got my coffee. Hope you've got your coffee. Let's dig into Mr. Warren Buffett. This one comes to us from the Daily Mail. The world's most successful, well-known investor has won his long-held bet that a fund controlled by a robot would outperform a human expert fund manager over the course of a decade. Have you seen this headline? This is really funny. 10 years ago, 2007, Warren Buffett bet investment firm Protege Partners $1 million that a fund designed to blindly follow the S&P 500 would beat a selection of funds managed by humans after a period of 10 years. So we've done stories in the past on the Stacky Benjamin show, our bigger podcast, that that Warren was winning. But how did he end up? The S&P 500 fund returned just over 7.1%, while the fund managed by hedge fund managers about 2.2%, I think was the number. 2.2%. I mean, it didn't beat it. Think about the difference. You think, okay, well, 2 versus 7. No, that's over 3.5 times the return on investment. Yeah, 2.2%. $1 million, by the way, the Buffett won, has been donated to Girls Inc., a U.S. charity that works to empower and inspire young women and girls. So what does this mean for you? Well, I'll tell you, while I like investing some of my portfolio in individual stocks and certainly have had fun with some mutual funds, really, this idea that passive is the way for most of us to go, right? So an exchange traded fund just means that you're purchasing a basket of securities that you hold on to. And if you're a buy and hold investor and you believe that markets over time are going to continue to go up like they have 70% of the time in the past, why wouldn't we do that? I mean, Mom says, keep it simple, right? So why wouldn't we keep it easy when it comes to our money? And also costs eat away at returns. And this is a two-sided sword for me, guys. Here's the thing. I totally believe that. And you have to watch out for your cost. But I'll also tell you, I remember there was this guy, I still remember his name. I had maybe been a financial advisor for 8 or 9 years. And I found in the first meeting, my goal in a first meeting with somebody was, I don't know if we're going to work together or not, but I want to find you as much money as I possibly can, right? So back in the day when I was a financial planner, I meet with this guy, Phil, and I find Phil like $1,200, just $1,200 in stuff. And I haven't even dug in yet. And I know that once I dig into Phil's situation, that we're going to find, most of the money's in the details that we don't even talk about. A lot of times people got money just going every which way and they've got no idea where it's going. So when I find $1,200 in the first meeting, that means that Phil is going to be fantastic. I was going to charge Phil $500. Now, the funny thing was was that $500. I mean, I don't know your thought process. To me, at the time, this was maybe 15 years ago. It's a lot of money, and clearly, it's a serious decision. But when I've already shown you $1,200, and I'm telling you that I know that we'll probably find 4 or 5 times that over time, that it's going to be a good relationship. And Phil thought about it and looked at me. He goes, "I don't think so. I want to keep my costs low. And a lot of the times, guys, we're fighting the wrong dragon. We've got money going every which way, and we've got resources that can totally help us, and we do nothing because we want to keep our costs low. And I have to tell you, when I was a financial planner, all I would see, and even now in financial media the past, nearly 10 years, all I see is people talking about cost. It's an easy dragon to fight. It is an easy way to make money. Clearly, in this fight, the S&P 500 was the way to go. But that's not the biggest dragon. The biggest dragon is you're not saving enough money. You're not controlling your cost. So I think we got to follow one of Mom's rules, which is think long-term, right? There's short-term and obvious, and there's long-term and not so obvious. And I think sometimes we think really short-term about the obvious thing when the non-obvious thing is often the better path. But clearly, cost eat away at returns. Good stuff. I love Melissa's comment. You got to fight the latte dragon. I don't know. You weren't at FinCon. I talked about the latte dragon before, and so when I was the FinCon MC of the main stage, and I got to interview David Bach in front of a room of about 2,500 people, and we put a tweet that I had written saying exactly, Marillus, what you're saying, which is that you've got to fight the latte dragon. And we put this tweet up that I had written saying that, if you think that lattes, I don't even remember the exact quote, but anyway, David Bach smacked me around a little bit. So it was pretty funny. All right, let's move on to our second headline, which is this one. I don't know if you saw this famous sideline reporter for sports fans. You might know this guy's name, Craig Sager. Craig Sager, this is from Yahoo News. Craig Sager's kids say they were written out of the will the day after the son's medical procedure to save the father's life. The Twitter spectacle surrounding late TNT reporter Craig Sager, his estate, and his children took a dramatic turn Wednesday of this week when his daughter Casey Sager provided details of how she and her siblings were written out of his will. So Craig Sager II, commonly known, I think, as Craig Sager Jr., he had all kinds of pins stuck in him trying to get enough stem cells to help save his dad's life. And then they found out that this wouldn't help save his dad's life. And right after going through that procedure to try to help save his dad's life, his dad wrote his son and his daughter and other family members out of his will. The piece of this that's making the family angry is, of course, Craig Sager divorced from their mother and had a second spouse who didn't get along with the kids. And so Sager wrote all the kids out of his will. And when you look at the dates on this piece, he did it within hours of his son trying to help save his life. So what can you do? But what can you do about that if you're the family? Clearly, the family can sue and say that he was under duress. They can stretch it out. The family's already said they're not going to do that. I think a lot of this is solved more ahead of time. Clearly, in this case, I'm not sure. Obviously, I don't know the Sager family, so I don't know exactly the relationship. Doesn't sound nice between stepmom and kids. But if we can work as much of that out as possible, and the estate plan out as much as possible, and involve as many people as possible, clearly, Craig Sager must have known that his new spouse didn't get along with his children. And if he wanted to make sure things were going to be straightforward and his kids weren't written out of the will later, because, I mean, think about the state Craig Sager was probably in. He might be on all kinds of drugs. He might have, he's thinking about all kinds of different things. It's a very emotional time, clearly. You probably know at that point that it's the end of your life based on what this piece says. So lots of stuff going through his head. If you don't want to make decisions during that time frame, and we'd always encourage people not to do that when I was a financial planner, I think that the key here is get everybody in the attorney's office together, talk about the estate plan with all the, with everybody involved, and then it's going to be very difficult to change later. In this case, that didn't happen. Estate was easy to change later. This isn't the biggest problem either. The biggest problem here is that people don't even do their estate. There are some huge numbers on people. I think it's like 1 in 2 people don't even have any type of will. And you can easily do a will through a place like LegalZoom on your own. I prefer using an attorney. The reason that I like having an attorney isn't that the attorney's not using the same stuff you'll find on LegalZoom. A lot of the time for an easy estate, the attorney's using the exact same. It looks very similar. Let's put it that way. The difference is that when you pass away, you're going to need an attorney anyway. And if you've got one that you already like, who you've already met with, that's another check and balance and somebody in your corner. And I don't know what the Sager estate was like, but I'm wondering if some of that might have helped. The takeaway though here, create your estate plan now. Actually, don't do it now. If you know the day you're going to die, and you're not that emotional that day, just do it as close to that day as possible, right? Don't waste your time on this stuff. But otherwise, if you don't know when you're going to die, which I guess most of us don't, then clearly get the estate plan done now. Hey, one last thing today before we say goodbye, and that is I'm going to be in Seattle next Friday, the January 19th at 6 p.m., Elysium Brewing on Capitol Hill. So join us there. Write me an email, joe@StackingBenjamins, if you plan on coming. I would love to actually see you there. And actually, you know what? I've got a couple seconds, and Karen's got a great question here to finish off the podcast. Would you have one will for the husband and wife, or one for each? Everybody has their own distinct will. And in a trust, you can have a joint trust, or you can have separate trust. And that's going to be a much more complicated thing. But if you're going after wills, everybody has a will. Here's the pieces of the will, though, that you really want to have. You want to have, number one, somebody who's the executor of the will, or what's called the contingent trustee if you go with a trust. That's the person who's going to make the decisions. Lots of people think about different things here. Here's my take. I would rather have one person. People say have many different people, have a couple people, have 3 people. Whenever there's multiple people, there's lots of fights. No matter what you do, things are going to be difficult. I would rather have one person who's going to follow your rules to the T, who is going to follow what you wrote, and they're okay with being seen as a jerk, right? As the family, not because the family starts to protest things. I'll give you an example. My grandmother, when she passed away, they had a fruit farm. The Seahigh family is known as the blueberry people in Southwest Michigan. We used to be back when my grandparents had their farm. But when they passed away, my dad has 16 brothers and sisters. Half the kids still wanted the land just to hunt. They didn't want to do the farm. And then the other half wanted to sell the property. It said specifically in the will to sell the property. My aunt, hearing the side of the family that didn't want to follow the will, stretched it out, and the process became really long and really aggravated. There were these family fights. It was very, very frustrating to see that happen. So the person has to be up to following what you say that you want to do. And they have to be okay with being seen as a jerk. I would have loved it if my aunt had just said, nope, this is what it says in my grandma's will, and do it that way. The second person is, if you have children, you want to have a custodian for the kids. And you also can have somebody separate who's the conservator. And that, by the way, is a person who handles the money. Most people have the same person as handle the money and take care of your children. You may want that. But if you've got somebody in your family, and I saw this a lot of the time, and I still see it a lot of the time, somebody's great with kids, but they're horrible with cash. So if you have one person who's great with cash, who kind of doles out the cash to the person who's taking care of your kids until whatever date you specified, or if it's a will, it's just age 18, you can solve a lot of problems that way and not have your children's money just flow through this person who's not very good with money's hands. That can be big. Now, I got to tell you about these 2 people. If you set these up as two separate people, somebody to handle the money and somebody to take care of your kids, they're going to hate each other. Like there's no way they're not going to hate each other, because the person who handles the children is going to be frustrated all the time that they can't get the money they need. And the other person with the controls is going to think that there's all kinds of pressure for them to dole out money that might not be needed. So get big stuff there. One more. Hey, Sam. Sam says, new federal inheritance tax exemption amount, big win for Americans. It is, but I'll tell you what I think is going to happen, Sam. A lot of people aren't going to do trusts anymore that should do trusts. They're not going to do trusts. And we could talk about this later in a couple hours when we just hang out for an hour, because I'm getting way off the reservation for the short podcast. But Melinda, hey, good seeing you again, says, Joe, how do you protect a minor child in a situation of a second marriage in the estate plan? Great question. And that one is definitely a question for your attorney. You can do it a couple different ways. You can set up certain things, like let's say you've got a 401k or an old IRA. You can have that go specifically to the child. Have the child be the primary beneficiary. You can also say X percentage of estate goes to the children. You can say upon your spouse's death in a second marriage. Now that person, by the way, if that money's not controlled, can do a lot of different things. Usually what people do is one of two things. They either have specific assets that go to the children, while the rest of the estate goes to their spouse, their new spouse, or they have trust work drawn up where money goes into a trust for the minor children that can't be touched by the spouse and is specifically for them. But that one, Melinda, clearly needs an attorney. That's when we start getting into some big tax stuff. All right, guys. If you're coming around for SB Live, for those of you watching live, we'll see you in a couple hours. For those of you on the podcast, thanks for listening. We'll see you again tomorrow. Go stack some Benjamins. Bye-bye.